Now let's talk about how we are to start testing the models, or how to test how our system handles those inputs. Obviously, when you have input, you want to store that input into the database. In Django, the database is abstracted by using what's called an ORM, or an object relational mapper. In the system, your raw SQL queries are turned into functions that you can call. So instead of using raw SQL queries, you're now going to use methods to filter out data, to insert data, to update data. In an ORM, classes map to database tables. The attributes of these classes are the database fields, and instances of these classes are individual records of your database table. To test models, we need to assume that what the database should contain. We are to assume because, obviously, we haven't created our models yet. However, in an ideal scenario, database design documents are created first before any development happens. These documents are created by a project manager together with business analysts. They analyze what the business needs, what fields or what data points they are to take in from the user, and what they need, and the data points that they need to analyze the business at that current point. Developers are not necessarily needed in this step. However, their input might be useful, especially when they try to flesh out certain levels of implementation. Okay? If the developers are not there, obviously these documents will be handed to the developer, and then the developer is going to create the tests, because that test guides the coding. Okay? Remember that your tests can be considered the specification of your implemented program. Okay? Now let's go on to creating our first test. Well, not our first test, but our first test for creating models. So let's go to tests.py. I commented out some of the tests because we didn't need it, so let's keep them there. I know it's bad practice, but this is to show you how to do this test. Okay? And so that you don't get confused once we actually do need those tests again, because eventually we will be needing all those tests again. Okay, so let's add my next class here. So I have 2 line breaks, and then let's say class item model test, and then it will obviously extend test case. Now we say that, since this is a to-do list, we need items in the to-do list, so we call it an item model. So what we do is from .models import item. So what we're doing here is we're importing the item class from the models module, or the models.py file. And then if we go to item model.test, okay, we create our test case, def test saving and retrieving items self. So we can create our first item is equal to item. So we are instantiating a new item. We are setting that item's text attribute to be equal to first item, and then we are saving that instance. I have a typo here. Now let's do that again. I copy everything, and then we say second item is equal to second item. We create an instance, second item.text is equal to second item, and then we save that as well. Lastly, we get all items. Items is equal to items dot item dot objects dot all, and then we assert that we have two items in the database. Save items is equal to item.count. Okay, it should be 2. And then let's get the individual items. Saved item 1 is equal to items 0, and then saved item 2 is items of index 1. Now we assert self.assert equal. We assume we test if the text of the saved item is equal to what we expect it to be. So saved item 1 dot text should be equal to first item. And then we also assert that that is true for the second item. Saved item 2 dot text should be equal to second item. So what is going on in our test? In our test, again, we are creating instances of the item class, and then we give that instance a text attribute with a string, and then we are saving that to the database using the save method. So we do that twice, and then to test that it does work and that we are able to retrieve it, we use item.objects.all. Okay. Ideally, or in another scenario, we could actually shorten our creation and saving into a single line. We could do something like this. So instead of first item equals item, and then the attribute is assigned, and then the instance is saved, we could just do this. First item is equal to item.objects.create, and then I say text is equal to first item. Okay, this is a more succinct way of doing it. However, I'm not going to use that so that you can see all the steps that are being taken. So that's it for this video. In the next video, I will be discussing most of the methods that are used here.